here, and do all this, and we'll just wait for the thing to pick up. I see one of them's gone live. That's good. And of course, I forgot to grab my water. Whoops. Hold on, where am I? I didn't, there we go. Bang. Okay, did that one. I did this. Okay, I just need to go grab my water, everybody. Sorry about that. It takes a minute for everything to spin up anyway, so it's not going to make a big difference. All right, I did all that. Okay, so let's get, let's see. Okay, these appear to be working, so let me at least do this and enable, and the window is there. Switch to live, please. Switch to participant list, and let's check the second one, and it is indeed live. We'll hit that, and we'll put this right here. Let's switch to live chat and participants. Okay, so let's do the tests real quick. EST1. Oh, I didn't hit the button. Hold on. I forgot to hit the button. Let's listen for the noise. Okay, it's actually not too bad because my volume's turned down, which is good. I'll turn it up a bit. And let's do a TEST1. I heard it. And, oh, I didn't enable it. Sorry, on the stream though. Let me turn this on. And go to the dash. No, not that. That just tells you the settings. There it is. Test 1 is successful. So we can now close that window. And then over here, we will go here and we will say TEST2. That is not good spelling, but it should work. And it did, so who cares what the spelling looks like? Close that window. And finally, TEST3. And it does appear and we have a noise. So I'm going to very quickly grab my water and then we'll get going here. So hold on a minute. All right, I don't know if my mic will cut out. When I walk over here, you'll hear some noise variation, some echo. So again, it might cut out. This is probably at the edge. That is not me using the toilet. That's the water filling up. Just in case it picks that up. That's enough. I never drink that much water anyway during a stream. So, okay, I have my water. I'm gonna have a sip now. All right, so here we are. Put the water right there. Let's roll our, actually, I should look at something before I do that. Oh, boy. Lucky me, my iPad upgraded to iOS 26. Hooray! Yay for me. What have they done to this thing? Oh, I probably have to recenter this because that would be, let's see, center, probably, no, horizontally. There we go. All right, now you can see it. Okay, you know what? I'm pretty close to being done with this, I think. Okay, I just wanted to check where I was on this. I really just have to figure out. So if I don't have a thing where I take the tape off, that's with the tape off. I think I am really going back and forth. Hold on the blood spatter for this. I really don't know whether that's a good or bad idea. I definitely want to do that red, the red outline. So I have to tape this off actually today probably. But boy, I'm just torn on whether this is a good or bad idea. You know what? Why don't I turn this off? This will make this a lot easier. I just want to see what this is really going to look like. Or at least a rough idea if I try to do a paint spatter. The other thing is, I have not tried to do a paint spatter on one of these canvases yet. This would be the first, and you know, and man, if I do that wrong, well, I guess I would have to retape. I would have to do it in several waves. I would just have to do it in waves, and then it might work. Let me just lower the opacity on this a hair so I can just see where the dude, somebody's doing some kind of work on their driveway, so you may hear banging in the background because there's a truck just pulled up with a huge amount of gravel and sand, so somebody's doing some work on their, I assume, driveway. I don't know what else you would need gravel and sand for, unless they're doing stuff in their backyard, like laying down something, but gravel and sand usually, I would think, well, maybe not. Gravel and, well, I shouldn't say that. I actually don't know what's in, the truck said gravel and sand. it may just be sand or gravel, or it may be something else. It could actually be neither of those things. Just because the truck says sand or gravel, I didn't, you know. I'm not one of those people that when I see something like that, I go out and like start staring at it. I don't care. What people do with their property is their business, and I don't get involved unless it's going to suddenly cause a problem for me, which no indication so far that there's anything like that. So I don't look. But like I said, the truck said sand or gravel, so, but it could be something else. Somebody could be doing landscaping. It could actually be soil or some kind of, you know, maybe they're doing a complete landscaping replacement, in which case it could just be dirt. Some kind of dirt. I don't know. But like I said, the truck, it's one of these big dump trucks that had a, what do you call it? I don't know what you call a little, you know, the dump truck has the thing that I don't know, it's not called a bucket, right? I don't know what the back of a dump truck is called. The thing that holds the actual dirt. I'm sure that thing has a name. I don't think it's called the bed. I would think it would be called something else. Oh God, let me look it up. This is stupid. It's gonna bug me if I don't know what it is. Hold on, let me see. What is the back of a dump truck called? Not a dyno. Boy, I misspelled dump truck to dyno. Here it is. What is the back of a dump truck called? The dump body? That's what it's called? The dump body? What? The back of a dump truck. Trailing axle of an articulated dump truck is 11 feet. Wow. Some of the different names for dump truck. This is amazing. But the dump truck... But the name dump truck is often a little confusing. Its cab sits on... Okay, yeah, the dump body. All right, articulated dump truck. So apparently... Really? Grain trucks. It's not a grain truck because... No, that doesn't... So this would be... I guess it's called... tailgate is a hinge. I know what that is. What? Wow. So it's really just called a dump body. All right, so... It was trailing a dump body on its own wheels behind it. And so I don't know if the actual dump body on the dump truck, this is amazing that I'm even saying these words, had anything in it. So we'll see. Anyway, much as I'd love to sit here and spend an hour talking about dump trucks and how they work, which actually I wouldn't, I could probably do that and have... no problem going on for that long, but I doubt anybody wants to hear that. So, anyway. Doing spatter like this, I mean, I kind of have an idea how I would do it. There's really two ways I think I could do it. I actually have a metal straw. I remember in art school, there was some kind of metal straw-like device that you used to do paint spatter, but it was really not made for large stuff. It was made for smaller stuff. You would not load a lot of paint into it. But I have this large plastic straw that, you know, like a plastic, or not, sorry, metal straw. That was given away with, I don't know, probably a Starbucks cup or something like that, where you could, you know, where they were doing a promotion. And my wife and I don't like metal straws just because they clink against your teeth and they have a really weird feeling. But I didn't get rid of it because it's a perfectly good, I mean, I use it mostly to stir paint, so I would absolutely not put the end of that thing in my mouth now because many of the paints I found out, oil paints, have a lot of toxins in them. And even though I doubt, if I'm not drinking the paint, I'm not so worried about it, honestly. But I wouldn't put it in my mouth regardless because it's only been used to stir paint. I would not consume any food with it. I think the only time I'd put it in my mouth is if I somehow needed, well, it wouldn't be my mouth. If somehow I needed an emergency tracheotomy or something and somebody had to stab a hole in my throat, they could use that, and I think that would be fine. But that's as close to my intake orifices on my body that straw is going to get because it's got layers of paint inside of it. And I doubt that would be too good for me. So I'm certainly not going to be using it to drink anything, is where I'm going with that. But I could probably use that. Or I could just try taking the end of the brush, putting a little bit of it paint, and like flicking it. But I don't know how good that's... I don't know the flicking brush method. You know, there's really good spatter you can get out of a spray paint pan. One of those. a spray paint can, but it's really more of a malfunction of the device than intentionally, so I wouldn't even rely on trying that. And, you know, that would be a one and done thing, because putting acrylic paint into a spray paint can, that's going to gunk it right up. That would be a one and done. So I would have to get, maybe they do make such a thing, a pressurized can meant to just have paint put in it. Maybe, but that's way overkill. So I will probably do the straw thing. I have a test canvas, which I'm actually going to be using later today, to kind of test out what the gold, whether I want to use gold or copper for the actual box thing. It's very funny. I just realized I start these streams and probably about 50, maybe not 50%, but close to 50% of the time, I'm going to work on one thing and then I remember something else. This is an ADD thing. And I just jump to another one and start working on it because I remember it. But in particular, I really want to get to... I'm both afraid and excited for this particular painting. Because if it comes out right, I've had the idea of doing a Hellraiser painting, something really purely horror-based, for a while now. I haven't really done one that's an actual horror painting. I have paintings that have sort of sinister overtones because of the colors I've used and kind of the scenes, but nothing that you could point to and say that is absolutely from somebody who likes horror movies. And that's what this would be. This would be instantly recognizable, I would hope, to people who are Hellraiser fans. They would see the box thing and they would know what it is. And so on the one hand, I really want to do it because I think it would work. I think it would look neat in paint. On the other, I'm kind of terrified to do it because it's so... Having this canvas look the way it does was really an accident. I think I talked about this when I last streamed this particular stuff that I'm doing here. It was not intended to be a Hellraiser painting at all. What happened was, and I apologize if you've heard this story before, it's not really a great story, I don't know if story is even the right word. The sequence of events, I don't know if that is enough to constitute a story, that led to this idea, or me doing this, is that I really wanted to use a canvas. Originally, the original idea of the canvas was something more like a, what do they call it, a Mondrian painting with a lot of just geometric lines and shapes in reds, because red is easily my favorite color. I love red. So I want to do these deep reds and kind of mess around with them and just see what I could do with just really simple, again, almost modern art looking designs. Just a lot of geometry, not really forms or specific things, just the geometry of it, which is sort of ironic because I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of modern art that relies on geometry, but it's not all bad. I just find some of it to be, I don't know, it doesn't look like it's really as intentional as the artist may say it is. And boy, is there a deep level of irony to me saying that when I'm talking about this canvas being a complete accident because it was not intended to be this way. But I'm steering it intentionally. That's the difference. So I did the painting. I don't think I took any footage of it. I wish I had. Because again, it was not, my original idea was that it was just going to be foundation colors. It really wasn't intended to be anything specific. So I didn't even think to have the camera rolling for it because it was just literally background layers. So I did these reds, and the red that I was using, well, actually, I think it was more of a problem with the brush. I think the brush wasn't as clean as it should have been. So the paint was very grippy. I don't think that's a word, but regardless. And what happened was the brush was grabbing the paint more than it typically would. I also think being cold had something to do with it. I think the cold was affecting it to some degree anyway. And so these streaks of like texture were starting to be introduced. And at first I thought, I could just brush those out and it'll be fine. And that's what I was trying to do. And they weren't coming out. They were just staying there. They were just getting streakier. And then there was a point where after trying to do this for a little bit, when I looked at it, and this doesn't, I don't know, the picture might not really... Okay, you could kind of see it there. See those lines? it was like, so when you actually look at the painting where the light's catching it, there's way more of this kind of texture here. And so, whoops. No, stop. And just turn this off. Ugh. See, you see the iOS-ness? Everything's rounded now. Oh, boy. Boy, Apple. Oh. Apple needs some shake-up, I think. They're drifting a bit, but we're not going to start on that. That's going to be a whole bunch of... That's a whole separate... That's almost a stream in itself. I could probably take the new iOS thing and just start to dismantle it top to bottom. Because, ugh. Anyway. And among other things Apple's been doing recently, where you sit there and go, okay, this company might be drifting a little bit. I'm not saying it's in trouble, but there's definitely signs that the company is not firing on all cylinders like it has been in many respects. Anyway, so once I saw these lines, they started to look like, honestly, they started to look like skinned muscle. Like from a Hellraiser movie, where if you've never seen a Hellraiser movie, and if you're not a horror fan, I don't know why you would have, but if you've never seen one, and I'll try to, because, I know some people are more sensitive to these things than others, so I'll try to figure out how to say this in the most delicate way possible, which is actually a fun challenge. The Hellraiser films, if you're not familiar, center around a group of extra-dimensional beings. Now, it's important to make a distinction here, and this is something interesting that I never really thought about until it was pointed out in a review I was watching of the entire run of all the movies, that the Hellraiser main antagonists, although I don't even know if you really consider them antagonists, but the extra-dimensional beings featured in the film, at first, were not tied to any particular religious anything. They were literally beings from another plane of existence that, again, I'm trying to think of how to word this in a way where this is still a work and family friendly concept here. They are beings that had a different frame of reference for physical experience. Ooh, that was good. That was a nice way to put it. And so things that may have been painful for us as human beings existing on this dimension, in this dimension, I should say, would not necessarily be painful to them. And so certain people, human beings in this plane of existence, who had become bored with the sensations that they would experience here. Boy, I am trying to almost PG this thing, which is quite a feat. These individuals, when they became bored of the activities they could engage in on this dimension, they would intentionally or not, often not really understanding what they were doing, but they would summon these things, these other creatures, these extra-dimensional beings, and these extra-dimensional beings would show up, and in many cases, as far as we've ever seen in the movies anyway, the people from this side of the dimensional wall would realize that perhaps what these other beings were doing would still be painful, would be too painful for them, despite what they might have thought initially. And that's what the movies are until they get into the later movies, which are largely garbage. But in the beginning, that was the basic idea, was, in particular, the first two movies, really, and then it starts drifting in terms of what it is from the third movie on. But in those first two movies in particular, and there's like 9 movies, but I would absolutely not tell anybody to watch anything past the 4th one. And some people would not even enjoy the 4th one. I think the 4th one is a riot. It's basically the old trope of, well, if we can't figure out anything else to do, let's go to space. Literally, that's what they did. And I think it's great. Especially the work print edition that you can get on the new set that they put out a few years ago, where you can see what the original, at least of what the original vision of the film was. And I think it's far superior to what was released theatrically. Anyway, back on topic. So in those initial 2 movies, the first 2 movies, which many people will say, and I wouldn't even necessarily put up much of an argument to this, even though I enjoy the the third and fourth movies for what they are, but many people will say, hey, it's only the first two movies and just stop after that. And if you don't have a tolerance for any level of cheese in your horror films, then I think that that's probably good advice. I think that's a good place to stop. But if you can tolerate a little bit of silliness and you just enjoy the Pinhead character, who really became the breakout character of the series, that was not the original intention, but that's what happened, then you will probably get a kick out of 3 and 4. So just a little tip in case you ever want to dip into this particular series. Just a little bit of advice for you. In any event, in the first two movies, it's very vague on where this other dimension is. And some people immediately attributed where they were to the classic heaven and hell archetypes. That these were beings that existed in what... Now, I don't know every religion that has a hell, so I cannot necessarily speak with authority to all religious versions of hell, but certainly the classic Christian Catholic version, which is a place where people who are bad are taken to be punished. That's the most lightweight way I can put it. So again, different religions may handle that differently. They may have the same word for a very different thing. Hell may not be a torture place for every religion. I cannot pretend that I know all the religions in the world. I do not. And even if I know what their names are, I don't know enough about how they function. So, for example, I know Tartarus, which is the Greek version of what some people call hell, wasn't really a torture place. It was more of at least, pardon me, at least in some versions of it, it's more of a place that you just linger because your soul is kind of detached from anything. And so you just kind of drift until you figure out where you need to end up or move on or whatever it is. Anyhow, so based on the classic version, wow, there's so much of this to remove, but I really think it's the only way to really see what this is going to look like. And whatever, I'm just talking about Hellraiser now, so who cares? In any event, the first two movies are very loose, and in fact, I think to some degree, specifically refute any idea that they are attached to that classic version of hell. Even though the movie is called Hellraiser, that term, it's loose. And like I said, none of the beings ever, especially once you get to the second one, because a bit of a spoiler for the second one, you get to see a little, just a bit, of the other dimension that these beings called the Cenobites come from. And I believe Cenobite is a religious term, but, and in the books, and this is where it really muddies the waters here, in the books, it does become explicitly religious in the classical sense. So again, there's a lot of, wow, what do you know? That's sort of funny. Just a little fun aside here. I called earlier because I had ordered something around Christmas time, and it was back ordered, and the order was just kind of stuck, and I noticed there was nothing happening. So I just happened to call this morning to see what was going on with it, and they said, it's in the warehouse. They're working on it. And when you know it, I just got a shipping confirmation. So I would have bet money that order would have been lost or would have just sat there if I hadn't called. In any event, we're not talking about order stuff. We're talking about Hellraiser films. So Clive Barker made it in specifically the final novel, but I reread the original book, and it is definitely not as explicit in there. At least not in very harsh terms. Again, you can read a book and you can pull out whatever appeals to you about it. You can make things about things even if they weren't written that way. So if I had to guess, again, would I think that Clive Barker initially meant it to be literal hell? Now, I don't know if he ever did an interview where he said otherwise, but it certainly was loose enough. And he did the first movie, and the first movie does not say anything specifically about where these beings come from. So at first, you could reasonably think that they were just from another dimension. Some kind of parallel universe or whatever, or again, they're humanoid, they're human beings. They're not aliens. per se, but they definitely have things going on that seem beyond what normal humans would be able to tolerate, as far as how they look, and there are some physical distortions to their bodies. So again, that's somewhat, you can read that either way. You can read that as a classic hell idea of torment or whatever, or that when these beings get pulled into another dimension, their bodies change and what they can handle changes. And then once you get to the third movie, it seems to start to get much more, no, we're talking about the classic version of hell here. These are beings that exist in a Christian idea of hell. And then, the fourth one doesn't really seem concerned with any of that stuff. It's hard to say, although I think they mention, even though this term doesn't really mean anything either, I do believe the term demon is mentioned. I'm sure some people hear the word demon and they think a certain thing. I don't know that that's a universal. I think a demon can be many things. And I'm, by the way, this is not me saying that you shouldn't read it as the classic version. I'm just saying that there was a point where it was a little bit more vague and open to interpretation, which for me personally is more interesting, is this idea that, okay, what if these are beings that, especially if it's like supposed to be a parallel universe or a different universe that's similar to ours, their development of these religious concepts went in a different direction because they didn't live in our dimension, so the things are slightly skewed. That to me is more interesting. But at the same time, if you want to read it as the pure classic version of things, you can. Again, I'm not saying that anybody would be wrong to read it that way. I myself find it more interesting, potentially, if this was in fact not a classic heaven or hell concept, but more of a variation or something that just seems to mirror it, because human beings, we tend to default to framing things in a way that we can understand. So it's more satisfying because our brains are built for pattern recognition. So what we do is we see something, and if we don't know what it is, the first thing we're inclined to do is try to make it into something we can understand. And the easiest way to do that with something beyond comprehension, which these beings would certainly classify as, would be to fit them into, okay, well, these look closest to this. And based on what they're saying and the words that they're using, they sound and seem like they're from this place. Whether in fact they are or not. Like in Event Horizon. Event Horizon, another great horror film. Probably one of the few movies I think that Paul W.S. Anderson has done that people universally like, because his movies can be divisive depending on which movie you're watching, that's for sure. And I would agree, they're not all very good. Some are quite bad. But Event Horizon is great. And Event Horizon, again, if you've never seen it, you may not be a horror film fan, so just a quick synopsis of the film. Has to do, it's the future. I don't remember how far in the future now it would be. It would have been the far future when the movie came out, or relatively far future. There's spaceships, so that's pretty far off, where people are just casually flying spaceships to Saturn and stuff. There's a rescue ship that is going to investigate the reappearance of a science vessel, I believe. I think it was supposed to be... Oh. It's all right. My dog just freaked out because the dump truck out there just dumped a... Hold on, I'm going to go make sure that was nothing more serious. I think it was just a dump truck dropping the payload. Hold on. Relax, cutie, I'll check. I don't think it's anything you got to worry about. I think they just dropped the thing. But I will check. Sorry, I might be wandering out of the mic range here. I'm just making sure nothing blew up out here. But, oh yeah. Yeah, they just... I see what they're doing. They just transferred. They're transferring the thing. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. Nothing to worry about. It's okay. You're fine. Nobody's going to come and drive through the front of the house. Jeez, that thing is loud, though. Wow, I don't know if you heard that. It's okay. It's just the truck. They're reattaching the trailer. Anyway, sorry. Okay. So Event Horizon. So this I believe science vessel with an experimental warp drive, which they don't call it a warp drive. They call it a gravity drive? I don't remember the exact name for it. This ship went to a certain point and then vanished. And this crew shows up, this rescue mission shows up to figure out what happened, why the ship has suddenly come back. And what happens eventually is that they discover that this ship traveled someplace. It went someplace, came back, and at one point, somebody says, oh, this ship has been to hell. And that person meant the classic version, the Christian version, where people are sent to be tormented for being bad people. And one of the beings, which I'm never really clear on whether this person, because it was one of the people who came with the crew, the scientist who was in charge of actually creating the drive for the ship, the scientist. I'm never really clear on whether he has any of himself left or if he's been completely converted by being absorbed into this thing. The movie never really specifies that I can tell, so I guess it's up to you. But in any event, he says hell is just a word. And again, you can take that line of dialogue however you want, but I always read it, and I think a lot of people read it as, okay, you're using a word and a concept because it's the closest you can get to understanding what's happening here. But in fact, much like the first two Hellraiser films, there's a very strong argument that, in fact, what happened is that it's just a different dimension where what's happening in there can only be closely approximated to the classic version of a hellish experience. So there again, that's what I mean about, there's a lot of leeway in it, in Hellraiser and Event Horizon, frankly. You can watch those movies and you can interpret them however you want. And I don't think interpreting them as, okay, this is the old school version of hell. This is what not we all, but a lot of people grew up being told hell is. Or you can look at it and say, no, that's not that at all. That's something completely different. And I don't think either movie. Now, of course, you start getting into what the people who wrote it, blah, 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 the intention of the filmmakers, all that stuff. But in the end, it really doesn't matter what a filmmaker wanted you to think. It matters what you think. That's, something that I feel like some filmmakers don't want to acknowledge, but it is the reality is a film, any story being told, unless something is specifically, directly, and clearly laid out, unless they were to say in Event Horizon, come out and have the devil walk out of a portal and say, yes, hello, I'm the devil, and you are in hell as defined by the Bible. Now, if that happened, you can't interpret it another way. That's the movie is telling you what's going on. But that never happens. There's nothing that ever shows up that looks anything like a classic, Christian demon. The main scientist has a bunch of cuts on his face, and some of them sort of look like they could be crosses, but they're also just a bunch of crisscross cuts. That's a tough one to say. So you can't really say for sure, pardon me, that... Let me get a drink of water really quick because my throat's dried up a little bit. Hold on. There we go. I don't think you could definitively say that those markings are in fact crosses. If you want to read it that way, you can. Nothing says it isn't, but nothing says it is. And that's where I think, okay, people want to read things into it. That's fine. You can. That's the nature of art. You are allowed to interpret art however you want. You can do that, right? That's fine. But I don't think the movie is giving you that. I think that's what a lot of people have decided to read into it because that's what they want it to be. And you can do that. The movie doesn't, also, to be clear about it, the movie doesn't say definitively, no, it isn't that. So you absolutely can come into the movie with that read of it, and you are absolutely correct. Your read of what's going on cannot be either confirmed nor denied. So you and another person can see two different sources for what's going on, and the best part is you're both right. You're both right. Because the movie doesn't ever take a particular stance on it. And so you're fine. That's good. I think that's to be encouraged. I am a big fan of art that lets you interpret it in the way that makes sense to you. Now, I don't have a problem with just so I'm not making it sound like I only want ambiguity. If a movie has a statement to make and makes it, hey, you can do that too. I'm not against that, but I also think that we sometimes having to consider and create your own interpretation of things is good. Not all art has to be clean cut and perfectly laid out. There are times where I think it's beneficial to sit there and try to figure out what's going on. It allows you to more, in some cases, it can allow you to more directly connect with the work. If you have to put a little effort in on your side, the work takes on more meaning. And I think that's good. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Well, there we go. We're done. Okay. Hold on. Let's see. Well, I don't even know which side is up now. So this is the maximum. All right. So this is what it would actually look like. So let's punch that in and let's punch this in. So that's actually right side up. So that's what it would actually look like. Oh boy, maybe it's because maybe I need a darker red. I don't think a different color would make a difference. We'll just look at it, but I don't think the color is gonna. No, I don't like a color change. I don't think it's a color change. I think it might be a brightness issue. So maybe if I'm doing a deeper red, something like that, that's more background. That might be better, like that, say. That I don't mind the look of. That actually could work. I mean, the other thing is I could try to do... I'd have to tape it so carefully to make this work. If I were to try to do, like, big, long spatters, but I think that's going to be so tricky to do. I don't even know if I'd be able to do it. Almost like Jackson Pollock drips, but I don't know if it would look good. And I'm really hesitant to do that. I mean, I'm still going back and forth on whether I need these things at all. Or if it's just better to have it like that. And just have the black background. Where's the red? The red aura. We are going to have the red aura. I could do the red aura around everything, although that would be a lot trickier with those small ones. A lot trickier. Yeah, I don't know. I really gotta think about this. But I'm just going back and forth. I just don't know if the red is too much. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. And then I'm also thinking, well, maybe I should put a black background behind the actual cube. Like, I keep going back and forth where I'm like, well, do I want this to be blacked out? Would that look better? And then have everything ringing around it like this, you know? Something like that, where it's really pushing up the idea of the cube, where this is really foregrounded now. See what I mean? Is that better than having the background show through? I've gone back and forth on that as well, where I'm not really sure. So is that better? But then there's no black in the rest of them, so would I have to come in here and black out, say that? Well, that one doesn't have the circle going all the way, so we could do it that way, and like this, and then black out these. You know what I mean? It's like, well, where do you, if you start that, do you stop it? Or do I keep going? Where everything now in these shapes is going to be blacked out. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I'm going back. I may just, you know what? You know what I may end up doing? I may do one of the smartest things I could possibly do with any situation like this. I may just ask my wife what she likes better. Somebody who has no attachment to the series, because she's seen the first Hellraiser film, but she's certainly not a fan like I am. Because I doubt she'll ever watch any of the other movies, and I wouldn't make her. She's not as big into the real horror stuff as I am. So, but I may ask her what she thinks of this. I may also go in. There's a couple of Discords where I might post these and say, okay, here's the 3 versions of this image, and number them and say, okay, everybody, what do you think looks better? And see what the consensus is, because like, I can see a version of that looks good, but I can also see a version of this that looks good. So it may, and then I'll probably do one without the blood too. So you know what? I think what I'm going to do now, I think I'm going to bring this stream to a close, because this is really a good planning session for this. And I think at this point, what I'm going to do is, I think I'm just going to consider what I want to do. and then and see what some folks think. Get some opinions, because yeah, I can see it either way. Or maybe. Or I could also see a version of this where, again, see, this is where you just go insane after a while, where there's no black anywhere but the central cube. You know what I mean? Just black there and no black anywhere else. So that'd be version 4. But that might look good too. So, all right. I'm clearly at a point where I'm going to need to have some outside input. So let's go ahead and do this. And yeah, I just have to think about it. I just got to consider it. I just got to consider it and see what I think. Because I think at this point I need outside input. Well, that was a good, nice little stream. I wasn't sure what the stream was going to be, but that's, you know what? I'm glad I got that, because I'm at a decision point with that painting, and I'm going to get some outside feedback, which is always good. I have no problem listening to people's opinions on things, and I'm going to see what people think. So that's where I'm going to land for now. So yeah, this was just I happen to have the time to be able to do the stream today. So this is kind of an out of the normal bandwidth stream. So thank you all for being here. As I always try to remember to tell people, if there's a creator that you enjoy, support that person. And it does not have to be monetarily, but if you can donate money, that's great. Otherwise, you can reshare, repost, and publicize their work and get their name out there. You can follow them if they're on different platforms and they're creating on those platforms. Follow them, subscribe, whatever the term might be on that platform. Or you can just send them a note or a message or whatever saying you enjoy their work. It doesn't have to be all the way one way or another. If you can do all those things, do all those things. If you can only do one or the other or a couple out of that list, do what you can do. But whatever you can do to support creators that you enjoy. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about other people. I am fine at the moment. I'm talking about other people who need more help and are really trying to make a living at being creative, which has never, ever, ever been easy, or at least hasn't been easy for a very long time, and certainly is not getting any easier. So whatever you can do to support a creator that you enjoy, you should do it, because you never know how close those people might be to being done with it, that they just can't keep going. And whatever you can do to help that person, if you enjoy their work, you should take the time to do it. On that note, have a wonderful rest of your day if you're seeing this when it's early, or evening if it's evening, or, well, I guess morning and afternoon, rest of your day applies, and evening if it's later on. If you're watching this live, that's great. I don't see anybody. That's fine too. So if you're watching this later, doesn't matter to me. I'm not chasing live numbers. So thank you for watching it whenever you do. And yeah, on that note, by the time this posts to the YouTube channel, I will probably already have made a decision on the painting. But feel free to make a comment and see if you were right about which way I should go. We'll see. I really, really, really don't know. Anyway, on that note, I'm getting out of here. So thanks for being here. Support your local creators in whatever way you can. And until next time, thanks for being here. Take care.